First up, let's get cracking. We've got Steve, the CEO at Codurance, coming to 10 years at Codurance, am I right?
Yeah.
This one?
10 years next month, yeah.
Oh, great. 25 years in the industry. Steve's talking about offshoring, so please give him a warm welcome, Steve Lyford.
I'm not going to read from a script, but if I don't keep to some notes, I'll just go for it. So we've got 15 minutes, so give us a shout about quarter past. Okay, so have we got my slides on here?
Yeah, just press the button.
Oh, look at that. Right. Fantastic. So I'm going to talk just for 15 minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions after. Just about offshoring. So who's dealing with an offshore partner, or works for an offshore partner, or is planning to bring an offshore partner in? It's going to be everyone in this room at some point. It's a $120 billion industry at the moment. It's growing 6.3% year on year. It's going everywhere. It's really become massive since COVID, right? Since everybody went home. Well, home can be anywhere now, right? So, just a couple of things. So, when I talk about offshoring here, right? So, you're hearing different terms. Your onshore is clearly people that are based in your home country, or in the UK. You'll see nearshore and offshore. Nearshore it tends to be the EU. So, places within an hour or two time zone difference, and then offshore tends to be different. Tends to be further afield. It tends to be like geographical distance, time zone difference, and then cultural and linguistic similarities. So, obviously the culture in Western Europe here is much closer to ours than perhaps Asia or Africa, etc. So that's what we tend to talk about. I'm just going to talk about is offshore, just across the thing. So about 70% of the software projects that are outsourced to third-party vendors in the UK at the moment are being delivered in some capacity offshore. And it's become a huge thing. So there are 1,500, thanks to ChatGPT, but there are 1,500 software development companies just in Ukraine right now. And 98% of the work that's done in Ukraine is for offshore clients. Right? So it's a huge thing. Common offshore places. So India and Eastern Europe have been doing it for a long time. But then as the markets become the market opportunities are there. You'll see growing places like Latin America, so Mexico, Brazil, Argentina got big offshore capabilities. Africa, particularly South Africa. South Africa is quite appealing for a lot of people because they speak English and they're in our time zone. So that's become quite a popular thing. And then you've got sort of Southeast and Central Asia, so places like the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, those kind of places. Every single one of them has got their own kind of strengths and weaknesses. It's not just about economics. We can talk, hang on, got two things going on here. Right, so we can talk quickly about some of the advantages. The biggest advantage by far is cost savings, okay? So, and this really depends on, it largely relates to how easy it is to work with it, right? So, so this is time zones, cultural, linguistic differences, skill levels, modern development, whether they're using modern development practices that fit well with your teams. But just to give you an idea of the cost savings, so Western Europe, places like Spain, Portugal, etc., they will be roughly 30 to 50% cheaper. Now, it's important to remember this is just on a day rate. I will cover some of the other costs. It's not, you can't just compare day rates. Eastern Europe will be 40 to 60% cheaper. Same as Latin America, 40 to 60% cheaper, and then out in Central Asia will be 50 to 70% cheaper. But like I say, you can't really calculate the full cost on a day rate. The other advantages, you'll see lots of advantages to offshore, and especially if you're talking to a salesperson from an offshoring company, but which I'm not. But the access to this global talent pool, so the required skills in the right places. You'll find that some areas of the world are, for historical and kind of cultural reasons, are really strong particular areas. So if you look at Eastern Europe, they tend to be some of the best crypto developers I've ever met have come from Eastern Europe. I had a friend called Robert who used to work for us at Codurance, and I said, well, why is it that everybody I meet from Poland is like amazing at all this kind of crypto and the hard kind of math stuff? He said, because when I went to university in Poland, they couldn't afford computers, so it was basically an applied maths course. They focused very much on the science side of the computer science, whereas we perhaps focus more on the kind of programming and computer side. 24/7 productivity. It takes a bit of management, but you can, and I've seen it, you can do 24/7 development cycles. The scalability, so this is one advantage of not just offshore, and I would say, well, I'll come to that in a minute, but the ability to bring people on with a specialist knowledge for a short period of time and then bring other specialists in. So that ability to do that. The kind of, and then this kind of, this ability to focus on your core business. So that your ability to focus on strategic areas and leave the kind of more kind of operational and tactical areas to an offshore partner. Now, of course, all of these things can be achieved in the UK, right? All of these things can be achieved in the UK. So why are we offshoring? Well, the primary thing is the cost savings, right? But, you know, money talks. If you've got enough money, you can achieve all of those things in the UK. But the more important stuff is the kind of the considerations, right? So it's not just we're going to go to India, we're going to go to Brazil, or whatever. So there are a few things I'm going to route through here, if time allows, right? So the first of all then being like communication. So the language is clearly can be a problem. So all of the companies will that work anywhere offshore will, for the right money, give you people that are fluent English speakers. Okay, but two things. One is the level of fluency will vary, right? What's fluent to one person it will be different to another. But the other thing is the cost. So we have a nearshore operation in Portugal. The Portuguese market for software engineers. Anyone here from Portugal? No?
Lyford.
Yeah. So what we found is the Portuguese market is split. So there are the Portuguese developers who don't speak English and they work for the local market, and there's Portuguese developers who can speak English and they work for American firms and UK firms, and they are the market's very split. So and they are much more expensive to hire because they can get jobs in working for US firms, etc. So there is a split. So it will cost you more to get kind of, or can often cost you more to get English speakers. So I would say that the ways to get around problems with the language, you can try and write everything down, anything that's important, use written communication wherever you can. Try and choose one kind of, aside from email, one asynchronous thing, so choose Slack or Teams, or just choose the one, agree it with the partner, and make sure that they use that. They may use Teams internally. If you're using Slack, insist they communicate on Slack, so you can, there's not back channels going on, so you can see what's going on. Use diagrams wherever possible. Diagrams, kind of universal language. Use things like domain-driven design. Domain-driven design is amazing for this. You've got that kind of common ubiquitous language. Everybody understands it. Everybody knows what that term means in that specific context. So domain-driven design can be fantastic when working with offshore partners. But just remember, like, this is your code base. You're going to have to manage this when they go. Okay, so just make sure that everything's written in your language. The documentation's in your language. It's well written and proofread. Time zones are a problem as well. As long as you've got some overlapping time zones or a bit of the day that overlaps, so that you can do the face-to-face stuff. And one thing that we learned, so I've been a software engineer for 25 years, so I both kind of worked with offshore partners, and now I'm the COO of a business that's got an offshore offering in Brazil. What we found is working to the west of the UK is massively advantageous in terms of time zones. What happens is you'll find that the teams will come online for you about lunchtime. So you can focus on all your UK teams in the morning, get them set up for the day, get yourself prepared, and then the people are in the East Coast US or in LATAM, they'll come online about lunchtime, and they're working until kind of 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Well, you don't want to be working that time, but you're still awake at least if there's an emergency, you can get hold of you, right? So that's been hugely advantageous. In terms of communications, you just need to set expectations, right? There's a massive cultural differences in terms of in communications. Set expectations for comms in both directions. Just encourage transparency throughout. Don't get overly upset when they come to you with bad news, because that will stop them coming to you with bad news. But the one thing I would say is, like, just don't tolerate any surprises. So one thing that I've experienced in the past is just people holding on to bad news and then coming to you with a surprise at the end. Well, there's nothing I can do about that. If you'd have told me when this was actually happening 3 months ago, when it started, we could have planned for it. So just there's that. Quality control is going to be the main thing that you need to watch out for. this is it's important to get some really strong technical practices in your teams and agreed in your teams and in their teams. It's important that all people, your teams and their teams adhere and are held to the same standards. One, it doesn't make like a two-tier kind of thing, but secondly, it means that you can put static code analysis and use tools to control that quality. Got a whole bunch of stuff on quality control, which I'm very happy to talk to you. But make sure that they are, manual tests. You'll see manual tests are just death waiting to happen. Every manual test you've got, that's going to last you forever, right? And eventually it'll grind you to a halt. Make sure that they have got non-functional requirements as well as functional requirements. We worked with someone a little while ago where they offshored stuff. It worked fantastically functionally. As soon as they put client number 2 on it, the whole thing fell over. It was very much a works on my machine kind of thing. So make sure they've got good non-functional requirements. Security resilience, I'm really sorry I'm rushing like mad for this, but security resilience, so this is around your cyber security. The number one thing, right, is never provide any production data. Remember, this data, even though your servers may be hosted within within the UK, for example, or even in your data center, they're going to have some data. They're going to need to run it locally on their machine. So never provide them any kind of PII data. Also think about the physical security. So the physical security side of cyber, of the kind of cyber threat. At the offices they work in that they secure is where they're storing the data, your production data or your production code secure. Is the office shared with anybody? Do they carry out background checks? Now, background checks are actually illegal in many countries as well, so often they can't do that. But in which case, are you able to interview the people before they join? Do they have any other security credentials, ISO 27001 or something like that? Or do you need to audit them yourself? But another big threat is the IP protection. Now, we have quite good IP protection in this country. The US have quite good IP protection. But it is country specific. There's some really good resources online that will tell you what the IP laws are like in different countries. They've got everything, not just your code, right? But they've got your algorithms, your business processes, your everything about your company. They have. So one thing for sure is everything should be built on your infrastructure, right? So whenever they're developing anything, should be built on your infrastructure, source control, all the documentation, your Jira, your Confluence, etc., etc. That's really important. Don't let them hold anything back, waiting for the milestone payment at the end or anything like that. We see that quite a lot. Just be really careful with your IP because it can be really, really difficult to, if you've got some claim against them and they're in a country that doesn't have either strong IP laws or you don't have any lawyers or jurisdiction. Very quickly then, so management and coordination, right? Don't underestimate. It's written on the slide. It doesn't. Just because you get an offshore partner doesn't mean that problem's gone away from you. They're still going to need much more management than if one of your team was doing it. Yes, you'll have some extra developer capacity, but it's going to require much more management. Hidden costs. There is a whole bunch of hidden costs that come with these things. Don't get fooled by the day rates. So there'll be potentially, I've seen hidden costs for things like engagement management, the legal setup of the contract in the first place, travel, all of these things kind of basically just add on to the day rate. So make sure you're comparing the whole price with somebody, with any kind of onshore or nearshore partners that you might be using. There is also the, who's private equity, working with a company that's private equity backed? Yeah, so they're really good at buying companies, right? Really good at buying companies. So if you need an offshore partner, one really popular solution if you're PE backed is to just get them to go and buy you an offshore partner, right? They're really good at it. So that's incredibly popular. And just kind of maybe it's if you're planning to do this thing for in the long term, maybe the best thing to do is to build it yourself. Okay. Right, couple of last pitfalls. I am right on quarter past, so I'm in a really rush. Choose the wrong partner. Okay, so make sure that you are able to evaluate their the team performance criteria and their hiring practices. How do they hire people, and how do they ensure that people have got the performance criteria? And I would say beware the kind of swapperoo here. So this is where they will often try to sell full-time equivalents, so they'll sell you FTEs. This doesn't mean you're getting a full-time developer. What this means is you're getting 40 hours a week of someone, and that might be 40 different people, right? So this is a real problem that I've come across. I've seen quite a lot. So make sure that wherever possible, if you've got decent, you can name people in the statement of work. You probably don't want to name people in the contract, but name people in the statement of work, or at least agreed in the contract that they are fully 100% dedicated to your project, and that there is some sort of rotation policy. People will leave their company. They will need people for other projects. That's perfectly normal, and it's quite healthy for your teams, right? That bit of rotation and diversity. But make sure you've got some policy in place to say, right, we want a month's notice, and we want to be able to approve the next person that's coming in, etc., because that happens a lot. Make sure you've got a plan B, right? Because with all the best will in the world, all the due diligence you want to do, it might go wrong. And very quickly on culturally, if you think about the UK, just in the UK, where we're all of a similar culture, just two different companies, two different industries in the UK. So for Codurance, my first gig for Codurance was at ASOS, right, the fashion company in London. It was really cool, big old warehouse building. My second gig for Codurance was at an investment bank in the city. Like, very different cultures, really different cultures, both within 2 miles of each other. So the cultural differences, so don't just look at the cultural differences country to country, but also look at where their past clients were, whether they're going to fit well with you. That's it. I would say that the one last thing, I'm happy to talk about this with anyone, but don't be careful not to neglect the current team. You're going to bring people into those remote working, particularly remote working with people in a different time zone, different culture, perhaps some language difficulties is really, really hard work. So make sure you've got buy-in from your current developers, that they know what's going on, that you're not just cheaping it out and you're going to replace them with some offshore people. Just really work with them, make sure that they're aware, and it's a pretty scary thing for people in the current climate. I have run out of time, there's a brilliant book called The Culture Map by Erin Mayer. If you're considering doing this, I'll definitely recommend picking up a copy of that book. If you see me afterwards, I've rattled through the slides. I'm more than happy to share them with you. You don't just know about Codurance. So there we are. I'll save you that.